Hello, and welcome back. I see you came back for part 2. So welcome back to our lesson on Unit 8, which is on wave, sound, and light. And here we are in part 2, which is on sound. So this is going to take some of the ideas of part 1 and kind of expound upon them. If you are just jumping in right here, don't. Go through the part 1 notes because you're going to need to know some of the definitions and terms that go with it. So first off, what is sound? Well, sound is a vibration of some sort of a material. What can that material be? Whatever it is. It can be a piece of metal, it can be air, it can be water. If you've ever gotten swimming and kind of go underwater, you know it sounds really differently. That's because sound waves are traveling through the water. Sound needs some sort of material to travel it. So it needs some sort of medium, because what happens is the molecules, actually sound waves, the molecules actually start vibrating. And one molecule starts vibrating, and it has hit the other one to pass the vibration along. So if there's no material, well then there's nothing to shake. So no sound. Hence why you can't get sound in outer space. Sorry, although Star Wars, you know, when the Death Star exploded, you know, it'd be an awesome explosion, but you really shouldn't hear it. You probably shouldn't even see the explosion to begin with because there's no oxygen, because that's what makes fire. So George Lucas, although he made some amazing movies, the physics, not so good. You know, Yoda doing the Force like this, that probably shouldn't be happening. However, the other thing is, based on whatever material the sound is going to travel in, it's actually going to probably travel a little bit differently. Sound is going to travel differently in solids, in gases, and in liquids, and we'll talk about that soon. The other one, sound is a longitudinal wave. So if you remember back to toilet paper, you know, transverse wave, longitudinal wave. Sound is this one. Sound is a longitudinal wave. A video I suggest that you watch is on the YouTube channel, the Unit 8 videos, the Honda's Musical Road. So what Honda did is to make nice cars, good engines. They took a road, I think it's somewhere in Arizona, and they actually cut grooves into the actual street. So if you've ever driven towards O'Hare, you're kind of coming in off of the 190 going towards the terminal, drive over the road. It's not bumpy, but you hear these are what are called rumble strips. And a lot of the noise you hear when you're driving is actually road noise. It's the air being pushed out of the treads of your tires. Well, so when they put grooves in the street, the air gets pushed out differently. So Honda, being the good company that they are about making things, they carved grooves into the street at very specific distances. So when you drive over it at a very specific speed, it actually plays, you hear the William Tell Overture being played. So I highly suggest that you take that up. Now, if you've ever been to the doctor's office and they used a stethoscope, this is my daughter's stethoscope from her veterinarian set, and you put it on your heart or somewhere else, what's happening is the stethoscope is actually picking up the vibrations from your heart, not the sound. Like if you do this, so like, don't do this to your doctor. Do this, and then do that. That hurts, because what's happening is you're pressing on this diaphragm here, and it's sending a sound wave through the air and into your ears. Don't do that. That's stupid, because that's actually going to like hurt your ears. Now, what else is sound? So again, sound is some sort of form of energy. So it's some sort of energy moving through materials. The Mythbusters did a thing where they actually tried to figure out a musical note that would be so loud, so much energy, it would cause you to poop yourself. But that actually never happened. My wife was looking at me just right now. She was like, "Oh, really?" It's like, "Yep." There is no what's called the brown note, Or if you had too much grape soda, it's a green note because grape soda turns your poop green. Materials that there are some materials that cannot absorb the energy of sound. So, and they reflect the wave. So if you think back to like our classroom over at our temporary location, the acoustics in there suck. Why? Because you've got like a tiled floor, plastered walls, plastered ceiling. The sound bounces around very, very nicely. So there's nothing there to absorb the sound wave. There are some materials that actually can absorb the sound wave. These tend to be like more like fibers, like carpeting, fabrics, foam. They can actually take the sound wave and literally absorb it. So a very good example of that is this is a picture of a recording studio. And the recording studio has this foam on the walls. It's sort of like a pyramid shape to it. And what happens is, as the recording artist is singing inside the room, the sound wave actually goes into these little channels that are created here by the foam. It actually just gets channeled right into it. So there's no reflection actually whatsoever. And there is a specific room called the world's quietest room that it's made of, the walls, ceiling, floor are made of this type of foam. And the triangles are of different, very specific sizes. Actually, you go into that room, it is so quiet that you actually hear your heartbeat, because you're hearing the blood actually moving through your ears. It's supposed to be very, very, very unnerving. And people are supposed to go crazy in it probably in about 5-10 minutes, because they're not used to hearing all these, like hearing their like blood move, because no other sound that's being created is bouncing off. So if you ever go into like a concert hall, not like, concert like, hey, this is Spinal Tap, rock music, not something like that. But if you go into where there's a stage, above the stage you're going to see generally foam panels, and the foam panels are generally not flat, but they're a little up like this. And what they're designed to do is take the sound from the musical instruments, have it go upwards, hit the panel, and reflect out to where you're sitting. Either do that, or they're there just to absorb the sound. Now, how fast does sound travel? Sound slow. Sound actually travels at about 340 meters per second in air, and I say about, which is because of temperature. Light is about 1,000,000 times faster. So light is 300 million meters per second, sound is 340 meters per second. So in a thunderstorm, so if you hear thunder and you see lightning at the same time, that was created right above you, because the thunder and the lightning are produced at the exact same time. That's the thing. In a thunderstorm, as I was watching this episode of Peppa Pig with my daughter, they were counting the time between the time you see the lightning and hear the thunder. So they're both created at the same time. Light travels faster, so it reaches you first. So you see the lightning, and you count, then you hear the thunder. The longer that number is, the farther away it goes. Funny story. So one time I was walking the dog, and there's lull and storm. I saw the lightning and heard the thunder at the exact same time. Dog was like, no, screw you, we're going back into the house. And we actually lost power at that point. Now, the other thing about sound is, because it is, like, again, that vibration of the molecules. So you have one molecule, and the other molecule starts vibrating. It changes with temperature. It also changes with the material. So in gases, the molecules are not that close together. So it takes some time for the vibration to go from one molecule to the other. Liquids are a little bit closer. Then in solids, they're really, really close to one another. So naturally, in a solid, the sound would travel the fastest in a solid. And it travels the slowest in a gas. But in a gas, it also varies with temperature. So here's air at 0 degrees C. Here's air at 100 degrees C. If you notice, there's about a 30 meter per second difference here. That's because air that is warmer, the molecules have more energy to it, so they're a little bit more wiggly. So since they're a little bit more wiggly, they can pass the vibration from one molecule to another a lot easier. Which is why in summertime, sound can travel faster, or can travel farther in the summer than it can in the winter. That's not the same for light, but we'll talk about why that is. Now if we take this speed of sound thing and just run with it, we can talk about subsonic or supersonic. And we're not talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. That's just some sort of rodent thing that moves. So an object that is traveling below the speed of sound, so let's say 340 meters per second, or it's about 760 miles an hour, is subsonic. Anything above that number is supersonic. Traveling at the speed of sound directly is what's called, you're traveling at Mach 1. You're traveling exactly at the speed of sound. So how fast is that? Well, a Boeing 747, which is a jet that can get you, across the world, at least not now, it travels at about Mach 0.8. An F-18 Hornet, which is a military jet, can travel at Mach 1.8. So you're just traveling at 1.8 times the speed of sound. The fastest military jet ever created, at least unclassified, is the SR-71 Blackbird that travels at Mach 3.2. It's not used anymore. It's just too fast. We just don't need it right now. There was a plane that could actually travel faster than the speed of sound, a passenger plane called the Concorde. And you could travel from New York to Paris in about half the time that you could in a normal passenger jet. Usually in a passenger jet it's about 8-10 hours or so. The Concorde you could get there in about 4. It was just too expensive, the gas was too expensive, the maintenance costs were too expensive, and they just stopped using it. Now, Santa Claus. If you have someone who is a little person watching the video, tell them to look away. Okay? Yeah. Santa Claus travels at Mach 6,395. That's fast. Some scientists actually figured out how fast Santa has to actually travel throughout the entire planet to deliver presents. And it is Mach 6,395. If you remember back to our lesson on G-forces, this is too fast. This is way too fast. Santa Claus, he break apart to become like salsa con queso. No. So, shh. That's too fast for Santa. Okay, if you have someone else who's really young watching this video, they can come back now. What's really cool is when they break the sound barrier, this happens. This isn't CG, this isn't like some sort of computer graphics. This finna be legit. So when a plane breaks a sound barrier, there's a pressure differential that happens around the plane itself that actually condenses the air around it and it creates this little temporary cloud. These clouds happen, these are, I don't know, these are probably F-18s or F-14s or 16s. These clouds happen around the jets just as they break the sound barriers, as they pass that Mach 1 barrier. And this is what you can see. And then what's called as the sonic boom is actually heard. Because what's happening, the sonic boom, is this object, its velocity is greater than the sound wave that it's creating. So there's a sonic boom that happens behind it. This is part of when a gun goes off. Part of the noise of a gun going off is the sonic boom, because the bullet is actually traveling faster than the sound barrier. Now, how do we hear? So we hear because of a vibration of your eardrum. Now, where's the eardrum? Well, it's in your ear. You know when you take a Q-tip and you shove it too far into your ear and you're like, ooh, that hurts? Don't do that. Because what you're doing is you're shoving the Q-tip into your ear canal and you're literally like brushing up against your eardrum. No. Not a good idea. Because what happens is your ears are designed so that sound actually travels into the ear and goes into the ear canal. So your ear is shaped as such to actually take sound waves and channel them into the ear canal. And then they take your eardrum and you start vibrating them. The volume is how far your eardrum vibrates back and forth. The note that you're hearing is how fast it actually vibrates back and forth. Folks that have been exposed to the very loud sounds for a very long period of time, those that usually work in construction sites, airports, military like artillerymen, where they're exposed to a lot of loud sounds, you notice their hearing just isn't very good because their eardrum and their entire ear has been exposed to loud sounds for a very, very long period of time. So you just lose their ability to hear. Some animals, if you actually look, some animals can actually hear really, really good sounds. So for example, dogs can hear a much lower sound than a human can. And they can actually hear a lot higher of a sound. There's what's called a dog whistle, so it's a training whistle. And it usually emits, some of them I've seen emit two frequencies. They emit a frequency that we can hear, so we know, yes, the whistle is working. Then emit the second frequency that we cannot hear, but that drives the dogs just absolutely crazy. And it's supposed to actually kind of like train them. Some animals, like cats have their, those little scoopy ears. That's designed to kind of collect the sound in. Bats, where's the bat here? Bats here have a very wide range of sound because, well, their vision sucks. So generally with any sort of animal, as the vision gets, as one sense gets worse, like vision, then their sense of sound actually gets a little bit better. So for example, this cat here, if you notice the cat's ears, the cat's not very happy right now. See the cat's ears here? See, so what happens is sound waves go and they enter the cat's ear, and the entire shape of the ear actually acts like a funnel, funneling the sound into the cat's ear. And then the cat can hear things. This cat is named Schrodinger because why did you like to sit in a box? The other thing with sound is we can talk about its intensity. Kind of as how loud, not how loud sound is, but how powerful a sound wave actually is. And it's measured in something that's called decibels. And again, I was talking about folks that work on construction sites, airport tarmacs, military artillerymen. They actually are exposed to sound levels that are very, 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 very high. And the louder the sound, the more damage can be done to the ear. Just to give you some examples, what's called the threshold of pain is 120 decibels. That's really, really loud. So if you've ever been to like a dance or a club, not that I've been a club, a dance club in God knows how many years, but you kind of walk out of the loud area and you go to an area that's really, really quiet and you hear kind of your ears ringing. Because why? Well, hell, duh. You've been exposed to these very, very loud sounds for such a long period of time that your ears just have been used to actually doing this very loud sound over and over and over and over again. Your ears just have to get used to hearing quiet sounds again. The other thing we can talk about with sound is called resonance. So, resonance is a very good spot to talk about musical instruments. So I have here a wine glass, and if I hit it, hear that noise? That is what is called the natural frequency of this glass. Every time I hit it, it wants to move at that exact frequency. So if I could, which I'm not, if I could sing to this glass at this sound, it would break. And that is the actual premise of this first YouTube video to watch, a singer breaking glass. And it has been done before. It's very, very difficult to do, because here's what resonance really is. It's I take this sound, put it at the glass, and because I am applying a sound that is at this sound, at the natural frequency of the glass, not only does the glass vibrate, but it actually starts vibrating greater. And then eventually the glass can actually break. But can you change the natural frequency? Absolutely. So if I have a thing of water here, and I put water into the glass, and if you were to do the following, so you take a piece of stemware, you wet your finger, and you do this. Let's make this work. There we go. You hear that? There's no excess audio there. That's the glass itself. I'm causing this glass to actually sing. Or I'm causing this glass to actually resonate. If I change the amount of water in the glass, and dealing with wet finger, now it's just a little bit higher now. If I take less water out, it's a little bit of a higher sound. This is what's called the natural frequency of the glass now. And if you do this at home, it has to be a piece of stemware. So this is like a wine glass. You have the glass and you have the stem. And if you notice, I'm holding on to it from the base. I'm not holding on to it from up here, because if I do that, watch, I'm going to move my thumb, the sound gets a little bit more muffled. And if I totally hold on to it, it no sound good. It is no happy sound. But it has to be stemware that you can actually do this on. And this is what's called, you're making the glass actually resonate. You're making it sing with some sort of a natural frequency to it. And the one video here, there's a guy who took a bunch of these glasses, put different levels of water in it, and had it actually sing to the song "Ode to Joy." This brings up musical instruments. So here is a little xylophone. You go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Oh, look. Oh. When I hit any one of these little pieces of metal, it resonates with a very specific sound. What you're hearing is a natural frequency of that actual piece of metal here. This is not an expensive one. It is a little toy. But if you notice, the ones that are larger have the lower notes. The ones that are higher have the higher notes. Why? Because the larger one has more stuff to vibrate. So if you go back to the idea of inertia, it's harder for it to vibrate everything. So it's going to vibrate slower. So you're going to have a lower frequency. So you're going to have a lower note to it. This is what percussion, same thing if you were to have a string instrument. And don't expect me to play this. This is a very bad failed attempt at trying to learn how to play the violin. So any string instrument on the violin, here you have badly out of tune. Don't judge. Don't judge. You have thinner string, thicker string. So again, the thicker one is a little more mass, takes more energy for it to vibrate, so it vibrates slower, so you have a lower frequency, so you have a lower note. So what's happening is you're causing this string to sort of resonate at some sort of natural frequency. Well, how do they change the notes? Well, they change how long the string actually is. By changing the length of the string, you're changing how much of it is actually vibrating, and by doing that, if you have less of the string to vibrate, you get a higher note. Because again, think of inertia and think of mass here. But what's happening is you're causing the string to resonate, and so as it vibrates at its own natural frequency. And why are violins hollow? Why do you have these little holes here? Because what happens is the actual string itself, the string not only vibrates, but it causes the entire cavity of the violin to vibrate itself, just kind of amplifying that sound. If you ever look at some sort of speakers, like the big subwoofers that you see like a house party goes, those speakers, but those are so large, the speaker is so large because it has to be able to hit the deeper note, but the cavity is very big, so it can actually kind of just provide this space here for the sound to propagate it. The last thing we're going to look at with sound is what's called the Doppler effect. So if you ever watch the radar, it doesn't matter if it's snow or rain, and you see the green, the greens, the yellows, the reds, if it's rain, or kind of the whites, the pinks, the blues, and the purples, if it's snow, that's because of the Doppler effect. And there's some sort of a Doppler radar dome somewhere around that actually sends out a wave, it hits the rain cloud or hits a snow cloud, and it comes back. And then it can tell either how intense the storm is and also exactly where it is. And it's the Doppler effect. A good example is as it gets nicer out, you might hear the ice cream truck going by, or the paleteros with their bells going by, especially if they're on the bicycles. And you hear kind of the sound go like, that's the Doppler effect. Or if you see a police car or a fire engine and it sounds kind of like a, that is because what is happening is the source of the sound is moving with respect to you. It's not staying stationary. You're staying stationary, but it's moving, it's going past you. And what's happening is that sound is constantly being put out, but as it gets closer to you, not only is it moving, but the sound is also moving out also. So like it hits you a lot faster as it gets closer to you, and as it goes away from you, it's kind of hitting you a lot slower. That's the Doppler effect. So if an object is moving towards you, the frequency is higher, like that. That's that example of the Doppler effect. If it is moving away from you, the frequency is lower. So you put it together, you go. A good example of this is on the YouTube channel Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. He goes dressed up to a Halloween party as the actual Doppler effect. And this is actually what allowed Edwin Hubble to actually figure out that the universe is actually getting bigger. He actually measured the wavelength coming off of galaxies and was able to figure out that, oh, wait a minute, this is getting a lot bigger. The frequency is actually dropping. So you can say, oh wait, the galaxies they are moving away from us. And he called it a redshift. Why did he call it a redshift? He did because red has the lowest frequency of the spectrum of visible light. So an example here in terms of like an airport is here's the plane and here's a radar unit, the control tower. It sends out a wave, it hits the plane, but then as it reflects back, it goes back to the radar unit. Well, if you look at the spacing, the waves that are going towards the plane are closer together and the waves that are moving as they come back from the plane, as they bounce back from the plane. So we have a smaller wavelength, bigger wavelength. So what happens here? So this frequency and this frequency are different. We have a smaller wavelength here, a bigger wavelength. If we assume the speed of the wave is the same, as the wavelength gets bigger, the frequency has to get smaller. So again, as the wavelength goes from this size to this size, so as the wavelength gets bigger, the frequency has to get smaller. So let's look back. So as the frequency is getting smaller, the object is moving away from us. So in this example, this plane is moving away from the radar tower because the reflected frequency is lower than the frequency that it was actually put out at the radar tower actually put out. That is one way that these radar towers can tell exactly where an object is. They don't do this wave back and forth once, they do it over and over and over again. And from there, that's how they can actually plot where planes and objects are in the sky. And really good radars, they can tell the difference between a plane and a birdie. Right, and that is it for this part of the lesson. As this is section 2 on sound. The next video is talking about light. So I'll see you then.